What's up guys, Asian here, and this video we're going to be discussing the new DLC that was just released on the PTS, Dragon's Bones. It's going to be patch 3.3.0 and I think it's about 2.2 gigabytes in order to download, so if you guys have access to the PTS, it's only available on the PC version. It's not available on any of the consoles, so unfortunately if you are a console player, the best that you're going to be able to do is really just kind of follow along with all the other ESO YouTubers and kind of follow along with the patch notes as well during the entire PTS process. So for those of you guys who don't know what the PTS is, it stands for the Public Test Server. ZeniMax provides this free of charge for all ESO players on the PC forums or on the PC platform. All you have to do is when you open up your launcher, let me actually pull up my launcher right now so you guys can see how exactly it works. So you can see here, I already have it downloaded here, but so if you do have it downloaded, then it'll show up here under your games. If you do want to download it though, you're going to have to go up here to the settings, and you're going to have to click on this, which shows Public Test Environment, which will pop up the PTS, and then you have to download it. The PTS is an exact copy of the live server, so it is going to take fair amount of space. It's about the same amount of space as the live game does, so essentially if you want to play on the PTS you need enough storage for basically 2 versions of ESO. So that's something you want to keep in mind if you do want to get involved, if you do want to start testing things out on the PTS and things like that. But today we're just going to be talking about the patch notes, kind of what my thoughts are and kind of what my initial feelings are as to how this is going to change the PvE meta, as well as a couple of my thoughts on the PvP meta. I'm not that big of a PvPer. I am trying to get into it and trying to start getting more involved in Battlegrounds and Cyrodiil, so I kind of have an idea of what's going on in PvP, but don't take anything that I say about it with any sort of confidence. Definitely take a look at ESO YouTubers who have more experience in PvP than I do if you are more interested in the PvP side of things rather than the PvE side of things. So the other thing that I also want to point out is that this is only the first release on the PTS. The PTS goes usually in 4-week cycles, so you have 2 weeks with the PCNA tunes. Basically they copy over the North American servers, and you have access to all your tunes if you play on the American servers, and then you have 2 weeks of the EU servers, so the European servers will get all their tunes, and then the North American servers will have to get templates, and vice versa for the first 2 weeks. So on the PTS you do get access to what are called template characters, which are basically max CP. You have all the skill points you need, you have all the equipment that you need in order to basically create any character you want. On the PTS everything is pretty much free on the template character, and everything on the crown store will cost exactly 1 crown, and you will be able to refresh your crowns every single day. They top you off at 5,500 every single day, so you can always have crowns on hand if you need to, add more characters, change your race, or do whatever you need to do. So that's kind of how the PTS works. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the PTS patch notes. So I won't be covering things like the new outfitting system or anything like that. I'm going to be really strictly just looking at PvE balance changes and PvP balance changes, so really just combat changes. I'm not going to be really touching upon anything else here. Alright, so this is the first page, table of contents. Alright, so Dragon Bones DLC, this is what 3.3.0 is. So this is basically a dungeon DLC set, so it's much like Shadows of the Hist or Horns of the Reach. It just releases 2 new dungeons. Doesn't release a new zone or anything like that, it's just these 2 new dungeons, as well as a slew of quality of life improvements and combat rebalances. So the first dungeon is going to be Fang Lair, and the second dungeon is going to be Skullcaller Peak. So these are 4-man dungeons, so DLC dungeons. Okay, so Fang Lair and Skullcaller Peak can be found in Bankarai and Stormhaven respectively. Normal and Vet, to be expected, so yep, I got the Undaunted Monster Helm and 3 new sets. Get the skin and the hat, titles, housing items, that's all pretty much what we expect. Collectibles. Ever since they started releasing DLCs, dungeon DLC packs, whenever you go to the first DLC you normally get an item. In this case it's a Dragon Priest mask. Trophies and busts for normal and vet. There's a skin for, let's see, speedrun, hard mode, no death for Scale Caller. You got a personality for speedrun, no death, hard mode for Fang Lair. Alright, here comes to the meaty part, the item sets. So we're going to go over the Fang Lair sets first. Let's see, light armor, Kalurian's Legacy. So we got spell crit, spell power, spell crit. When you deal critical damage with a single target magic ability, you launch a fire, ice, shock, or disease ball at your target that deals 12,900 damage and applies a status effect. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. That's actually pretty interesting. So Zaz has kind of shied away, or supposedly shied away from proc sets because I'm not sure if you guys remember, I think this was back in Horns of the Reach where they nerfed all the proc sets in the game, so they or either end up being dots or there was a very clear telegraph. This is kind of a about face, almost a hypocritical kind of set here, but in terms of PvE, it seems like it might be interesting. The applies a status effect definitely sounds very strong. So you're either going to apply burning, chilled, so minor maim, concussed, or disease, which is major defile. So that's once every 10 seconds, and if this follows the enchant status effect cooldowns, it will be last for 4 seconds. So just from this set alone, you're looking at 40% uptime on any of those status effects, but it is random, and it is with a single target magicka ability, so things like blockade, liquid lightning, that's not going to proc it. It's going to be basically your spammable. The question is, do lightning stave heavy attacks proc this? I guess that's something that I will kind of figure out on the PTS. It's also only crit damage too, so that's interesting. It's also whether light attacks will proc this too, because technically light attacks are abilities, but they don't use magicka, so I don't think light and heavy attacks are going to proc this, but I'll figure it out on the PTS. Alright, medium set, Trappings of Invigoration, Stamina Regen, Max Stam Regen. When you cast an ability while under 33% Stam, you restore 9,000 Stamina. This effect can occur once every 1 minute. So this is basically like Magicka Furnace just for stamina, so pretty much a set that you can decon. You're not really going to be using this set. If it was like, maybe like 800 stam regen, maybe, but nah. If it's just 9,000 stamina every 1 minute, that's pretty shit. It's pretty crap. Ulflor's Favor, max health, magicka regen, stamina regen, health healing taken, increases the magicka or stamina you have your attacks restored by 30%. So this is pretty much going to be a sustained set. Well, there are going to be changes in the tanking block costs that I'm going to go over later on in the video. But I don't think tanks are going to use this, and it's a heavy set, so you're not going to see it be used for any DPS, and even in PvP you're not going to really use it, so this is probably another one of those decon sets. Let's see, Monster Helm, Thurvo Kun, max health. When a nearby enemy damages you, summon a growing pool of desecrated bile for 8 seconds. Enemies in the bile receive 430 disease damage every 1 second and are afflicted with minor maim and minor defile, reducing their damage done and healing received by 15 seconds. This effect can occur once every 8 seconds. So it looks like this is definitely more of a PvP set with the minor maim and minor defile. Yeah, this is definitely a PvP set. You're not going to see this in PvE, but I can see this being potentially useful on PvP tanks. You just run in there and just basically vomit this pile of bile out and afflict the enemy with minor maim, minor defile. It might be interesting for a PvP set. I don't think it'll replace Bloodspawn, but it might be interesting. So basically from Fang Lair, the only interesting set's going to be the light set, so I'm going to test out on the PTS and see how good it is. Scale Caller Peak. Jorvold's Guidance, Magicka Regen, Healing Done, increases the duration of all major buffs, minor buffs, and damage shields you apply to yourself and allies by 40%. This is actually a pretty interesting set. I feel like this might be a new healer meta. So it's basically all named buffs, so major buffs, minor buffs, and damage shields you apply to yourself and your allies by 40%. So I'm just thinking like Warhorn. Major force is 9.5 seconds, so if you do the math real quick, let's do the math up here. So we're doing 9.5 times, let's see, it'd be 1.4, so you're looking at 13.3 seconds of major force uptime, so you're looking at an increase of 4 seconds. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. It would increase your Warhorn uptime too. I'm not sure if it would affect the stamina and magicka boost, but it definitely affects the health boost because that's minor toughness. So that'll boost it up from 30 up to, let's see, 30 up to 42 seconds. So your Warhorn, you're looking at pretty much 100% Warhorn uptime if it affects the stamina and magicka. That's something I have to test on the PTS too. Comet Prayer, it'll affect Comet Prayer, your minor berserk uptime. If you pair this with Master Architect, it should also impact your Major Slayer that you give from Master Architect. So that might be combining this with Master Architect on a Warden healer for 4-man content. That might not be a bad idea, or a Warden tank if you're using War Machine. That might actually be pretty decent for 4-man content. So yeah, this light armor set might be a new healer meta. I feel like 40% is a little bit overpowered right now. I feel like they might tone it down to something like 30% or maybe even 25%. But if they do tone it down to 30 or 25%, it still might be a good set to use instead of Mending, because Mending is the other major set that people use besides Worm and SPC. So if this replaces Mending, that might be useful, at least for if you're going for like speed runs and score runs. I can see Yorvold's guidance being pretty strong in that regard. Alright, so medium set, Plague Slinger, weapon damage, max health, weapon damage. When you take damage, you summon a Skeever Corpse, which will launch a poison ball that deals 5160 poison damage every 1.5 seconds at the nearest enemy for 6 seconds. This effect can occur once every 15 seconds. So this is basically like the Defiler set from Morrowind. Except it's not when you deal damage, it's when you take damage, so it's even worse. This is definitely going to be a decon set. It's when you take damage. If it's when you deal damage, I can see it maybe being somewhat useful, but it's when you take damage, so I don't. It's going to be like the Defiler set from Morrowind. It's going to be pretty much useless. It might be decent for, if you're trying to get up to like the meta DPS builds, but you still have to farm it, and DLC dungeons are going to be difficult. So no, this is going to be a decon set. Okay. Curse of Doilemish. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Max health, spell damage, weapon damage. When you hit a taunted monster with a fully charged heavy attack, or any enemy that is stunned or immobilized with a fully charged heavy attack, you deal an additional 12,040 physical damage. This effect can occur once every 7 seconds. Might be interesting for PvP. Combine that with maybe like a Sork and Elegance, and use like Rune Prison on a Mag Sork, and then use a heavy attack channel, but I don't see it being very useful because it's any enemy that's stunned or immobilized so if you have CC break, that just pretty much defeats the point of this set in PvP. And a lot of people are running immovability pots and using shuffle if they're meaty armor builds or immovable. So I think this set's also going to be another one of those decon sets. San. I'm guessing this is like dragon language because this is all based on like Dragon Priest, Dragon Bones is kind of in the name. So Za'an, I guess. Spell crits. When you deal critical damage with a light or heavy attack to a nearby enemy, a beam of fire will connect you to your enemy. The beam deals 3440 flame damage every 1 second for 5 seconds. Every second this damage increases by 50%. This beam is broken if the enemy moves 10 meters away from you. This effect can occur once every 15 seconds. So this might actually be the new melee magicka DPS meta. Unfortunately, there are changes in off balance that I'm going to cover later on this video. So mag DKs are kind of in a really bad spot right now. In fact, mag DKs are pretty much dead, in my opinion, for PvE. But Magplars might make a comeback because they did fix sweeps and they did fix J-beams. So there's a potential that Magplars might be somewhat competitive, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. So that would be the only monster class that you would actually use it on, would be Magplars or Mag DKs. You would have to be really good with your light weaving in order to get the proc off because it's light or heavy attacks. But if you are doing endgame content, you should be at least fairly decent at light weaving. So I don't think proccing it's going to be an issue here. The question is, again, mobile fights. Like I'm sticking St. Lothus, St. Felms, when they're moving around a lot. That's obviously this set's gonna be limited in use because they're teleporting around everywhere. But for fights like, let's say like Ethereal Archive, where the mage is basically standing there, I think this set might be pretty powerful. I think this might rival Grothar or even surpass Grothar in terms of DPS potential. I have to test it on the PTS, but it's definitely a very powerful set. Achievements, battlegrounds, 2 maps, outfits. Again, we're not really going to be covering outfits. Anything that's like not combat related, you guys can peruse that your own leisure. They are adding 30 additional CP points, so the CP cap is going up by 30, so that's going to change CP distributions. Let's see. Anything in Clockwork City? Nope. Okay, so there's nothing here in terms of Asylum or any of the sets. Dark Brotherhood, nothing here. Horns of the Reach. That doesn't involve combat. Imperial City, nothing here. Morrowind. Battlegrounds is going to be non-CP again, so that's kind of a welcome change. A lot of people have been. I don't really play Battlegrounds too much. I'm just starting to get into it, but from what I've heard, CP Battlegrounds was pretty bad. So, for those of you guys who are interested in Battlegrounds, I do play Battlegrounds. It's going to be non-CP from now on, so that's, I guess, good for you guys. Also, this increase in AP. So basically, if you just participate, you get 10,000 AP. So I'm expecting. I think this is a incentive for people to play Battlegrounds more, because Battlegrounds is kind of dead right now, compared to Cyrodiil at least. So I feel like this is going to be incentive, because all you have to do is just play a game, because there's 3 teams, so if you come in 3rd place, that means you lost, but you get 10,000 AP, so that's actually not bad, and Battlegrounds games can go by pretty quick. If the shortest game that I ever had maybe lasted like 2 or 3 minutes, so that's actually not bad if you want to AP farm. Animation, audio, combat, Warden balance changes. They said they were going to give it to us, but that's only one ability, green balance. So it's not even a DPS ability. Yay, Zos. Healing Seed reduced the cost of the ability and it's more by 28%. So there you have it. That's your Warden class balance changes. But yeah, Magical Wardens, they need a rebalance badly, because as you guys saw in my Magical Warden video, it's abysmally behind all the other Magicka DPS specs in PvE, and that's like the best build that I've gotten. Actually, I did a parse last night, with Mayflower. I kind of did a DPS parse with the raid buffs, so they gave you Major Breach, Elemental Drain, Torgue's Infused Crusher, Combat Prayer, Spell Power Cure, and Warhorn. So and then make you do a 6 million dummy parse. I managed to break 40k with the guard build when I had guard on, but only just barely. It was like 40.7k. And I'd compare that to like the other DPS, Magicka DPS specs in the guild. My Magicka Nightblade pulled 46. And as far as I know, that's the highest Magicka Nightblade parse that we have right now. A Magsork non-pet pulled 44k. Another Magsork that parsed that day on a non-pet pulled 42k. I think our raid lead pulled, I think, 44. No, not our raid lead. One of our admins pulled 45k on a Nightblade, and our raid lead pulled 40k flat on a Khajiit Nightblade, or maybe been 41k on a Khajiit Nightblade. So Magical Wardens are the problem with Magical Wardens is, while it's possible to get 40k, I mean I did it, but it's just, it requires so much more work, and Magical Wardens really need that buff again, and Zos really has to get on the ball with that, because right now, like, Magical Wardens, their ceiling is lower, and the floor is, well, it's about the same as the other classes. It's a lot harder for people to get up to 30k on a Magical Warden. A lot of people who I know who are trying Magical Warden DPS for PvE, they're struggling to get above 30k, so yeah, I'm not pleased with this balance change for Warden. I only do green balance. So this is not good. So the Magical Warden build that I use with Scathing Mage and Neurinus, that's pretty much going to be dead in the water because Swarm is now going to be considered a dot instead of direct damage. So I need to remake a Magical Warden build. I think I'm just going to end up using something like Julianos and Scoria, but I'll play around and I'll see if there's another set that I can use on Magical Wardens, but the Scathing Mage and Rhineth combo is not going to be as strong anymore, so I'll see what I can pull up, but yeah, it's not good for Magical Wardens. Let's see, this is Arsenium. Nothing really much here. Thieves Guild. Maw, they're just fixing the visual effects on the weapons. Here we go. Combat and gameplay, the real meat of this video. So AoE effects now deal full damage to all targets hit instead of having damage penalty after hitting 7 or more targets. Secondary effects from those area effects are still capped at 6 targets. So this is pretty much going to be only really you're going to notice it in PvP Cyrodiil only. So before, when you cast something like Eye of the Storm and you kind of like went into a Zerg ball, you would start dealing reduced damage. Basically, 6 people get hit for the full damage, and everybody else after that got, I think it was a 50% penalty, or it might have been 25%, but it was a fairly sizable penalty. So now you're going to be able to melt people faster, and you're going to be able to counter Zerg balls a lot easier. So if you have like 2 or 3 stamina DPS, each throwing down the caltrops down, they'll actually do a little bit more damage now. So it's a nice change for PvP. I think it's going to be a more fast-paced now in Cyrodiil now. So cast times and interrupts. So they rebalanced cast times. So they reduced the movement speed penalty to a 25% penalty instead of 50%. So you'll be moving twice as fast now when you are channeling or casting. Say that melee cast time and channel abilities. So basically anything like dizzying swings, puncturing sweeps, biting jabs. Those will still allow you to move at full speed. So don't need to worry about that. So that's actually, I mean, I don't think it's going to really affect anything too much. Nothing in PvE, and probably not too much in PvP either. When ability is interrupted, it is now put on a 3-second cooldown when it cannot be used. Melee cast time and challenge abilities, so dizzying swings, puncturing strikes, all that stuff, that's still exempt. This might actually matter a little bit in PvP, but I don't really see this making that big of a deal, except for like people who spam snipe, I guess. So they're gonna like spam snipe once every 3 seconds now. But like not many people are, or at least not good PvPers at least, are spam snipers or like dark flare spammers. So I don't think it's gonna really affect PvP at all. So yeah, let's see. When a cast time or channel ability is interrupted, you'll be staggered, stunned, or set off balance. After the stun ends, you gain crowd control immunity. So this is pretty much like they're taking what happens in PvE and copying it over to PvP. So that is what it is. CC immunity now grants immunity to all interrupt effects. After a cast time or channel ability is interrupted, you will be immune to any future interrupts until CC immunity wears off. This applies only to players. Monsters are still exceptions and can be interrupted at any time. Okay. So CC immunity grants immunity to all interrupt effects. So CC immunity, I believe, lasts for 6 seconds. So it seems like if you do get interrupted and use CC break or something like that, you'll be immune for 6 seconds to any interrupts. So it might play a role in PvP. Again, I don't PvP that much. I've only recently gotten into Cyrodiil and Battlegrounds. So I think you're gonna have to be a little bit more strategic as to when you use your cast time abilities now, because I'm just thinking like J-beam. If you can interrupt somebody's J-beam, they can't use it for 3 seconds afterwards, and then they're gonna have to rely on something else instead as execute. Soul Assault maybe. I don't think they can interrupt Soul Assault, but no, it seems like ultimate abilities can't be interrupted. So yeah. So yeah, I think you'll have to be a little bit more strategic as to when you use your cast times. So like J beams and snipes and dark flares, if you are one of those players who use those abilities. But I think ultimately this isn't really going to change too much in Cyrodiil, at least for the guys who are good at PvP. So not me, basically. This is going to affect me more as I try not to learn not to use snipe or something like that. You now see red interruptible telegraphs to enemy players if they are casting or channeling interruptible abilities and are not crowd control immune. So that just basically means it makes it easier for you to see when you can interrupt an enemy. So, yeah, I think that's a welcome change. You know, being able to know when you can interrupt something. Synergy changes. Oh boy. Remove synergies from the global cooldown. They can now be activated while using other abilities. So synergies on live server right now are on the global cooldown. So basically, if you use an ability, you can't activate a synergy while you're going through the ability animation. You actually have to wait for that 1 second cooldown in order to use it. So basically what it is, it's like if you want to use a synergy, you have to use ability, synergy, ability, instead of going something like ability, synergy at the same time. So this is nice, so it's going to be a little more fluid now in order to activate synergies, which is nice. Synergies now have a shared 1 second cooldown with other synergies. This is probably just to prevent like people spamming synergies in order to get the Undaunted Medal, the passive that basically gives you resources back every time you activate a synergy. So it looks like synergies are on their own cooldown now. So they're still on the global cooldown, it's just with each other instead of the global cooldown, so it's kind of a synergy global cooldown. Let's see, increase the cooldown for each individual synergy to 30 seconds from 20 seconds. Now this sucks. This is a 50% increase on synergy cooldown time. This is absolute garbage, in my opinion. Because if you think about it, orbs, you can only get them once every 30 seconds now. Shards, if you got an orb, 30 seconds. Conduits, 30 seconds. This basically kills Alkosh for tanks. Alkosh uptime now, if you only have orbs, is going to be 33% max. If you have orbs and Conduit, you're still going to have 10 seconds of downtime, so you're still looking at 66% uptime max. So Alkosh, yeah, that ain't going to be a thing for tanks anymore. Remember that you need 24% uptime on Alkosh in order to beat Torug's. If the max is 33, you know, there's no reason to run Alkosh anymore. So, yeah, I think that's a bad change. I think it's a bad change, and it's gonna nerf sustain because now you're gonna have to wait even longer in order to pop an orb now. So yeah, that's not a welcome change in my opinion. Synergies now display a unique prominent visual effect indicating if a synergy is available, can be used by your character. So it's basically like a visual cue to indicate when you can use your synergies. It's going to be hidden if you can't use a synergy. So there's that. Updated tooltips, so better describe their effects. Okay. So this is another big change of synergies. It'll grant a synergy prompt to 3 allies instead of 1. And if that one person uses a synergy, then it'll be removed for the other 2 allies. So if you have an orb floating by, a group of people, 3 people will be able to see the synergy prompt, and if one of them uses it, then the other 2 can't use it anymore. So for healers, you're just going to have to make sure you're pumping up more than 1 orb at a time. For vet trials, you're typically doing that anyways, so it's not really going to be too much of a change in your playstyle. That's something you kind of want to be aware of. So it looks like there are exceptions. Purify, which comes from Extended Ritual, Hidden Refresh, I don't know where that comes from. Blood Funnel and Blood Feast, those come from the Blood Altar, the first ability in the Undaunted skill tree. That prompt appears to everybody. Let's see. So they fixed the fix where numerous synergies granting synergy prompt to furthest ally instead of the closest, and granting the synergy prompt to pets and NPCs instead of players. Oh, didn't know that, so okay, whatever. Fix an issue where you could have multiple synergy prompts on you at the same time, so that's kind of like the synergy flashing that you sometimes see in trials. Okay, so apparently Supernova, the Nova ability, had magicka cost when you used it. Okay, whatever. Let's see, synergies have received fine-tuning and rebalancing. Blood Altar increased the radius of the minor lifesteal debuff and its morphs to 28 meters from 8 meters. That's actually pretty nice. That's pretty much the range of Eben. That's actually a really huge radius now, so it might actually be worth running this now. Except it still has the cast time, so might not be. Minor lifesteal debuff applied with this ability will no longer aggro monsters. Blood Funnel and Blood Feast, which are the morphs, increased again to 28 meters. Bone Wall, Spinal Surge, this is Bone Shield, this is one of the abilities under the Undaunted skill tree. Probably be available up to 6 seconds after it's cast. Grants a damage shield at 100% of your max health for 6 seconds instead of 60% for 10 seconds. If an ally uses synergy and applies damage shield to you, you will now also be placed on the cooldown for that synergy, so I guess that's to prevent people just continually spamming the shield and get 100% uptime on that shield. Grants major vitality instead of minor vitality. I mean, this is still a stamina ability for damage shield, so I don't think it's going to be very useful. I don't think anyone's going to use it even after these changes. Yeah. Orbs. Not explode the closest orbs to you. That's not really anything to be concerned about. Frozen Retreat, that's the portal under Warden abilities. Grants major expedition for 8 seconds after teleporting. Renamed the Icy Escape. Consuming Darkness, I think this is a Nightblade ultimate. Visible to allies under 70% health, up from 50%. Increased movement speed boost to 70 from 50. Movement speed bonus and heal over time are now separate components for the invisibility and remain in character for 4 seconds. Okay, so this isn't really a morph ability that you use too much. This is kind of this is an ability that's kind of very situational to use, so I don't see this really changing too much. Impale damages enemies held within Talon instead of all enemies. Increases damage done by 25%. Renamed to Ignite, so not much of a change there. Inner Fire morph, that synergy. Only visible to allies positioned further than 18 meters away from the taunted enemy. That's kind of a nerf. So you have to be a certain distance away now in order to use that synergy. It's kind of a shame. Oh well. Trapping Webs morphs. So this is another Undaunted ability that you almost never ever seen use. Prompt will only be visible to allies positioned further than 18 meters away. Prompt will now be available against all enemies in the web, even if they cannot be snared. Prompt will be available against bosses or flying enemies. Spider summons now inherit your damage done bonuses. Okay, so I mean this is an ability that nobody really uses, so I think even after the changes, it's not gonna really be used. Summon Storm Atronak. Atronak, summoned by this ability and its morphs, now inherit your damage done bonuses like Major and Minor Berserk. And your CP passives. Atronak now uses the highest of your Magicka or Stamina based stats instead of an average of Stamina and Magicka. I don't know why it worked this way. It's stupid, but okay, whatever. Higher damage done for Magicka or Stamina builds, but may result in less damage done for hybrid builds. Atronach Summon will now last for 3 seconds longer. So this is actually pretty interesting. This might make Storm Atronach a good ultimate to use for Magsorks. Probably not for Stamsorks. You probably still got to use the Ballista for Stamsorks. But this might actually end up being useful. I'm going to test this out in the PTS again just to kind of see how it stacks up compared to using like the Destro ulti, or I guess the better comparison would be Shooting Star because they cost the same amount of ultimate. But I can see this actually being pretty strong now. So you might see a change in the meta. You might see Magsorks using the Storm Aether ultimate instead of like Shooting Star. So you guys might want to level that. Block cost reduction. Decreased the base cost of block to 1730 from 2160. However, jewelry enchants that reduce the cost of block are now subtracted from the base cost first and then percentages afterwards. So on live it's the other way around. They do the percentages first and then the block cost reduction from jewelry. So this is actually going to be a nerf. So block cost is actually going to end up going up. I actually already did the math. It's going to end up being about a 150 to 200% increase in your block cost on average. The difference between 4 sturdy, so sturdy and all small, versus sturdy on all pieces is going to be 90 stamina difference now. But it is going to be a nerf for block cost. So you're gaining about 200 or so additional stamina on your block cost now. So that it is definitely a big nerf, and you're going to feel it as a tank in PvE content. So this is definitely something that really makes me upset with tanking. Tanks are already hard enough to come by, and they're just making it that much harder for people to get in with these changes. If they're trying to, I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to fix perma-blocking in PvP, but perma-blocking isn't the problem in PvP, it's the damage reduction in PvP. So, you know, all the minor protection and major defile and minor defile stacking on top of each other when you apply it with stuff like Fasala's Guise. So, you know, they're trying to fix a problem that really isn't a problem, that needs to be solved in different ways. So this is not one of their better changes. This is not a good change for PvE tanks. If anything, it's going to make it harder. This is going to be increase the skill cap required for PvE tanks, because now you're going to have the heavy attack, which means you're going to have to learn the mechanics. It's just increasing the bar even higher for PvE tanks. I don't like this change. This change is garbage. Destro Staff passive Ancient Knowledge now reduces the block cost by 18 to 36 instead of 18 to 30. They're trying to make Ice Staff tanking a thing. It's never gonna be a thing. Okay, heavy attacks and off balance. This is another big change in the meta. Using a heavy attack against an off balance enemy will not only consume the off balance debuff if the enemy is successfully stunned. Boss enemies are not able to be stunned, so you will never be able to consume off balance. Seems good, right? Read on. This means that using heavy attack against an off balance boss enemy will not consume an off balance effect. Like I just said, this new behavior also applies to Power Lash, which is the main mag DK spamble. Excuse me. So mag DK, you're able to spam it for 4 seconds now. Using a heavy attack against an off-balance enemy player will now stun them in the same way that it stuns monsters. I mean, sure. I don't think it's really going to change much. And this new behavior also applies to Power Lash, so guess what? You can pretty much stun lock a player for 4 seconds now, assuming they're not CC immune. That's a lot of fun in PvP. Magdik's just got a buff in PvP. Using a fully charged heavy attack against an off-balance enemy will now restore double the amount of resources. A nice buff. Boss enemies can now only be set off-balance once every 15 to 20 seconds. After the first off-balance debuff ends on a boss enemy, they will be immune to subsequent off-balance debuffs until this immunity duration is over. This sucks. This ends up being from about a 80 to 100% uptime on off-balance down to 26.6 to 20% uptime on off-balance. If we're looking at things, if damage scales linearly from the Exploiter passive, which boosts damage done by 10%, you're looking at a 7.5 to 8% decrease in DPS on all DPS tunes. Doesn't matter that, I mean, there's going to be a little bit more complicated math because heavy attacks don't consume off balance anymore, but you're looking at a very sizable DPS loss because of this this change. So we're gonna have to. This is gonna be a huge shift away from the off balance meta that emerged since Morrowind released about 7 months out. It's only been 6 or 7 months ago that Morrowind was released. But yeah, this is gonna be a big shift in the PvE meta. Off balance meta. Good, it's a big change now. So stam DKs are probably going to be the ones that are going to get hit hardest because their rotation relies a lot on the heavy attacks. So I don't know how this is going to play out. This is a boost. This is going to probably be a buff for any light attack builds. So pretty much most Magicka DPS builds. Stamina DPS, you will probably see a little bit of a loss as a result of this. I'm not sure if the extra CP we gain, the extra 10 CP, is going to make up for this DPS loss. But I will have to play around with the CP point distributions. Right now in the PTS, the target dummies actually don't count as boss enemies, so you can have 100% uptime on off-balance on the target dummies, so it's not going to be reflective of off-balance uptimes against bosses. I did write a note to a post on the official forums asking whether this was intended or not. Hopefully they swap it so that target dummies do count as boss enemies in terms of off-balance uptime, so that way, you know, the builds that I make and the builds that I test are actually reflective of kind of off-balance uptime you see in a raid. So right now, because of that, I can't really test anything out right now. But this does change a couple of things now. So the off-balance meta basically is why a lot of Magicka DPS shifted from Fire Blockade to Lightning Blockade, because Lightning Blockade is what sets enemies off balance. But if the off-balance uptime, there's a cooldown now of 15 to 20 seconds, it's not really going to be worth running Lightning Wall anymore, because, well, you don't need as many Lightning Walls in order to keep off-balance uptime if you can only have it up for 25% of the time. So you might start seeing certain Magicka DPS classes move away from Lightning Wall and go back to Firewall. The big ones are obviously going to be Magplars and Magma Nightblades. Those are the two ones that I think are going to move to Fire, VMA Fire backbars instead of Lightning backbars. I think Magsorks are still going to be running Lightning Wall because of their innate boost to shock damage. That's the only class I think that's going to continue to use Lightning Wall. So Magicka Wardens, Magicka Templars, Magicka Nightblades, I think they're going to shift to Fire Blockades, because now you don't need as many Lightning Walls in order to maintain off-balance uptime. You're still going to definitely be using shock enchants on your front bar because you still want to get minor vulnerability uptime, the concussed uptime, because that's still an 8% boost and there's no cooldown on that. So you're going to want to maintain minor vulnerability uptime, but I feel like with this drop in off-balance uptime, you're going to see, like I said, a lot of people shifting away from Lightning Wall to Firewall instead. I can't test this on the PTS right now because, again, the skeletons have 100% uptime off-balance theoretical, so I can't test it. So I'm either going to have to like do blood spawn parses, which really sucks and it's time consuming, and I don't want to do it because I have to drag somebody else with me, and it's not worth it. So I'm gonna hopefully they change it so target dummies do count as boss enemies for off-balance uptime purposes. I'm not keeping my fingers crossed, but hopefully they'll make that change so we can test things out on the PTS. Off-balance visual effects are better. Ground-based area effect abilities will now persist after you leave combat rather than being removed immediately. This isn't really going to change too much. This is just kind of like quality of life stuff, I guess. Let's see. Nightblade, Assassination, Teleport Strike, decreases damage dealt by this ability and its bonus by 13%. So under development comments, I'll actually open this for gap closers. They're actually nerfing all gap closers. They're decreasing the damage done by all of them. So things like crit charge as two-hander build and focus charge on Templars, those are all getting nerfed as well. Just because you can read it here. Gap closers have no cooldowns, can hit for a high amount of damage, so there's no or very little opportunity cost. So they're just decreasing the damage, so you know, you're not spamming it in order to catch up to someone who's running away. Aedric Spears, same thing. They're decreasing the damage on focus charge by 18%. Puncturing Strikes, they refactored the damage done so it works more intuitively with damage taken bonuses by an enemy. Previously it was be additive. So they say this will result in increased damage, but I tested it out on the PTS and it seems like it's a little bugged. Actually, sweeps isn't healing you, so I feel like they didn't quite fix it correctly. I'm not 100% sure. Combat metrics is also broken, so I can't actually I can't open up a combat metrics report, so I can't see the average hits or the max hits on puncturing sweeps. But once I get the combat metrics gets patched for the new API, I'll definitely take a look and see if it actually is a boost or not, if it's a sizable boost. But yeah, so sweeps and jabs are technically fixed, so it is a buff to Magicka and stamina DPS. At least if you're just looking at that. Crit charge and crit rush, again, they decrease the damage done by them. One-handed shield charge, again, it's a gap closer, so they reduce the damage. Werewolf, again, reduce the damage from Pounce, which is a gap closer. Alliance War, Magicka Debt, reduce the cast time of this and an Inevitable Debt to 1.5 from 1.8 seconds. It's not going to change much. 0.3 of seconds isn't that big of a deal. Let's see. That's an issue there. Fixed Veiled Strike. Here. Templar, Dawn's Wrath. Backlash, fixed an issue where multiple Templars using this ability and its morph against the same target would not deal the full amount of intended damage, so this is going to be a slight buff. This was a bug. I didn't know about it until right now, actually. Radiant Depression, so J-Beam, fixed an issue where execute bonus damage and Magicka bonus damage were not multiplicative, so now it is multiplicative, so J-Beam is finally fixed. Again, until combat metrics is fixed for the new API boost, I can't tell you my averages or my max hits. But this should be a nice boost to Magplar DPS. Let's see. Heavy armor, they fixed Unstoppable where it wasn't lasting as long as it should have. Rapid maneuvers, they just fixed an issue here. Fixed a passive for Imperials. Itemization. They just fixed a couple of issues here, so nothing much. So they increased the Allied well buffs to 30 minutes from 10 minutes, so definitely want to grab those Allied buffs. I think it gives you 5% extra health. It gives you extra health, so it's worth grabbing. Imperial NPCs in Cyrodiil can now drop keep repair kits and other consumables if you are one of those people who likes to kill NPCs. I don't think anything else here is fixed. Monster abilities. So Daedroth, this is NPC Daedroth, obviously, not the Daedroth that's summoned from the Maw of Infernal. Um, they basically made some fixes with Ground Tremor, Nightblade, any Nightblade NPCs. Okay. Okay, so they fixed a couple of stuff here. So they reduced the drop rates for motifs. This isn't really balance. Glass motif. Glass motif can be purchased from Hlalu, which is the writ voucher merchant. Transmutation. So they fixed the bug with rewards at the worthy, so you can you can't just get a bunch on one character and then open them on other tunes. You actually have to get them on that tune now. So that's a fix there. Crown Store, Crown Crates, don't care about that. It's fixed City of Ash. I'm pretty sure that's it for combat updates. These are all quests, UIs. Oh, here. They killed Miats, so add-ons will now only know about attacks that target you after they hit you in PvP areas. So Miats will no longer work. You won't be able to use it and tell if someone is targeting you with snipe and stuff like that. So a nice fix. Kindly killed a very controversial add-on. So yeah, manage that. But I think that's it. Yeah, so that's it for the patch notes. So my feelings about this are there are a couple of good changes here. I like the fact that there might be a new healer meta set. But a lot of these changes I feel like are a little bit too much. The block cost reduction, for instance, I don't like that. I think it's just setting the gate a little bit too high for PvE tanks. I don't like that at all. The off-balance changes are going to require some thinking about. I think it is something that should have been done, but I feel like there would have been a different way to do it. Maybe like tone down the exploiter passive instead of making such a long cooldown. But we'll see how they change this. Typically speaking, they won't make any balance changes on the first PTS patch after they release it. It's going to be the second PTS patch, so not next week, but the week after. They're going to probably introduce all the balance changes from the feedback that they're getting. So next week we probably won't see any balance changes. It's probably going to be the week after we're going to see a lot of balance changes. But I am kind of excited about this because this is a pretty big change to the meta. Just from changing basically one thing, mainly off balance for DPS. Tanking, definitely going to need to take a look at tanking in terms of how to sustain. It seems like ZOS is trying to push us away from being more support and being more selfish with our sets, so things like sustain sets and health sets and all that stuff, which I don't like. I think tanks should be more support, much like healers. I mean, you're there to support the group. While yes, your main job is to be a meat sponge, you know, you can be a meat sponge and still buff the group at the same time. So I don't like the direction that ZOS is taking with tanks. It feels like they're trying to make it more like meat sponge and less support role. So I don't like that. But again, we'll see what happens with the balance changes that they do in 2 weeks from now. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the PTS. So overall, changes that I think that were well needed. I just don't necessarily think they're doing it in the right way. So yeah, I'll definitely be on the lookout for a couple of videos. I will be potentially streaming some the new dungeon runs on the PTS. I don't know if I'm going to do them in a group or as a solo. I already tried them on solo, but it seems like there are mechanics that prevent you from finishing the dungeons by yourself. So I'm going to try to get some friends who have PTS and try to run with them. So be on the lookout for that. I might stream those here and there. And I will do some videos throughout the PTS cycle as new patch notes are released and as I discover new information and kind of draw more conclusions in the PTS. But Like I said at the beginning of this video, if you guys have stuck around for this long, PTS is always going to be changing, and just like Coins of the Reach, they might make a huge change between the last PTS week and when it actually releases. So take everything that I do on the PTS with a grain of salt, because all that can change by the time it is released on the console and on the PC. So do keep that in mind. If I do release any videos on the PTS, I'm not gonna I'm gonna try really hard not to pull an outcast where basically where I say, oh, run this and this, and then the Horns of the Reach drops and it just becomes completely obsolete. So I'm gonna try to avoid doing that if I can, but I'll definitely share my findings with you guys, and kind of give my opinions on things as the PTS cycle progresses. So that's it for this video. I know it was very long, but there was a lot of stuff to cover with this with the first PTS patch notes. Future PTS patch note videos are probably going to be shorter because there won't be as much to cover. Thanks for everyone who stuck around. So hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys around in the next dungeon.